Welcome back to my channel, everyone. This is Mike. Yeah, it's Mike, all right. You may be wondering about this headband. The headband came with this steelbook that I bought yesterday of Zoolander. Bought this at Big Lots for $5. Wasn't going to pass it up. And it's supposed to be an authentic headband from the film, right? I don't know about that, but I've never seen this movie. I have no idea what it's about, but looks like it might be a lot of fun. So anyway, this is going to be my new look in all of my videos. I think that if I give myself a little class here, you might take me more seriously or something, but then maybe not. All right, so I'm here to, why am I here? I'm here to talk about movies from A to Z, and today we're up to the letter U, and the film I've chosen is Undercurrent, 1946 release from MGM, directed by Vince Minnelli. Three great actors starring in it: Katharine Hepburn, Robert Taylor, and Robert Mitchum. And it's also classified as a film noir from the encyclopedia. So with all this big MGM money, budget, class, gloss, all the things they threw into their films, big stars, great director, you think you'd have a classic film from the golden age? Well, maybe not. I think the film has a lot of good things going for it, but as a whole, it's kind of a mess. And I've watched it several times recently, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a delightful mess. It's a mess I will watch many times in the future and have a good time watching. But yeah, so let's talk about it a little bit. Try not to give away too much of the plot, because some of you probably haven't seen this, and you might want to. I'm going to recommend this. I would like to have other people watch this film and give me their opinions, because you might have a completely different impression of this film than I do. So I'd love to start a conversation. Undercurrent. Now, it starts out with Katharine Hepburn plays a woman named Anne Hamilton. She's a middle-aged woman living with her father, played by Edmund Gwenn, and their cantankerous housekeeper, played by Marjorie Main, always a welcome face in pictures. And she is living a very happy, satisfied life. She's never been married, with her father, who happens to be a scientist, and she is helping him with her work. And it turns out that her mother was also a scientist, so it's kind of a family project. But she's very happy, and she doesn't seem to be a miserable, frustrated spinster at all. She has a man that loves her very much and would love to marry her. He keeps asking her, but she keeps turning him down because she says, "I think of you more as a friend. There's just no spark there." Well, so that's the first part of the film. Then we go quickly to the second part of the film, where Robert Taylor comes into her life. He's a businessman, a wealthy, successful businessman who's going to do some kind of a business deal with the father. And she is immediately dazzled by this man, and so there's the spark happens, right, when she sees Robert Taylor. And it's mutual, so they have a very quick courtship, and they end up getting married. So then we move into the second part of the film where, well, yeah, that continues the second part of the film, where she moves into this man's world, a world that she knows nothing about: wealthy people, beautiful houses, and lots of money, and parties, and beautiful clothes, none of which she's accustomed to. So she's kind of a fish out of water, and that adds the drama, that brings the drama to this part of the film. And she's very much submerging herself into the life of her husband. She's obviously wildly in love with this guy, and she tells him, "You brought me into this strange new world," and she's trying to kind of submerge her identity into the identity of her husband instead of just being the independent woman she was before. Always a big mistake. So Anne finds out quite by accident that her husband has a brother named Michael Garraway. And did I say the name of Robert Taylor? Alan Garraway. Sorry, I might have left that out, but Alan Garraway has a brother named Michael. So she's wondering, well, why didn't you tell me about your brother? And she asks him about it in a very matter-of-fact way, and he gets very, very dark and very mysterious, and talks about the relationship with the brother was obviously very troubled. He doesn't want to give away a lot of details, and of course she becomes very apprehensive, wondering what happened. He gives her an explanation that the brother stole from the family business, and then that he ended up going away, and Alan says he doesn't care if he ever sees him again. Well, things develop along these lines. At first she believes what he says, But as she hears about Michael from other people who have known them for a long time, she begins to suspect that there's more to the story. In fact, she begins to wonder, through the suggestions of other people, that perhaps Michael is dead. And she begins to wonder if Alan killed him, right? So that's when it gets, the noir element really kicks in. And it develops even farther. The story doesn't stop there just with that plot point, but she begins to be fearful that Alan is not at all the person that she thought that she had married. He's somebody completely different, completely disturbed, and that he is trying to kill her. So the movie gets very dramatic, very melodramatic actually, and all of a sudden we see elements of other films such as Gaslight, Suspicion, maybe a little Rebecca thrown in there, and also the movie Laura, where, if you remember, the police detective found himself falling in love with an image of a woman that he had never met. The more he learned about her, who she was in her life, he began to fall madly in love with a corpse, right? Well, in a way, that's what happens with Anne. She starts becoming obsessed with Michael, wondering if maybe he was really the man that she would have fallen in love with if she had met him instead of the brother who she thinks is trying to kill her. So it gets really crazy, and that's why I think that it's not very successful, because it's a very long movie. It's about 111 minutes long, but the first two parts of the film, in the beginning, you have sort of the Katharine Hepburn that we've come to know in many other successful films, where she's the independent, outspoken, satisfied, self-identifying woman. And then in the second film, and the second part, and then of course in the latter part of the film, the bulk of the film, she is someone who is very weak and very needy. And I guess I just don't like Katharine Hepburn being that kind of person. I like her better being independent than I do being pathetic, I guess. But that's subjective. But she gives it her all. She had a lot of dialogue in this film, and I don't know. I think that it may have been a real challenge for her to continue in this. I can't imagine that someone as perceptive as Katharine Hepburn did not see that the story of this picture was not very cohesive in all three of its parts. But so anyway, it's a very interesting film. It has a lot of good things in it, and I recommend it with a certain amount of reservation. But I think a lot of people might see this very differently than I do. It did make money at MGM. It had mixed critical reception, but it did bring home a profit. So it wasn't a complete washout. Now, Robert Taylor, this was the first film that he made after having been away in World War II and away from the screen for a while, so he was anxious to do something important and have a big hit. Robert Mitchum, of course, he was under contract to RKO Radio Pictures, and he had started his career in the early 1940s. In the year 1943, he was in 19 films. Most of them were just very brief walk-ons and uncredited films and low-budget westerns. He did a lot of Hopalong Cassidy westerns, and that's how he got started, and slowly building up a reputation. And in 1945, Robert Mitchum was in a film called The Story of G.I. Joe over at United Artists, and he received an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. So he started getting a lot more prestige connected to his name and his career, and MGM decided that they wanted to make use of him, so they paid a lot of money to RKO to get Mitchum to come over and do not only Undercurrent, but another film called Desire Me, with another one of their biggest stars, Greer Garson. That's a film I've never seen. Greer Garson. Yeah, I'd like to see that. And at the same time, he was also doing a film at RKO called The Locket, which was another film noir style picture. So it was a very busy time for Robert Mitchum. But I think that in this film, he's only in it for about 15 minutes. The character of Michael is not... It's more a character that everyone's talking about and worrying about, rather than we're getting to see him on the screen. And quite frankly, when Robert Mitchum is on the screen in this character, I think that he just sort of shows up and recites his lines. There's not a lot of tension going on. There's not a lot of effort, as I see it. He has 2 brief scenes with Katharine Hepburn, 1 with Robert Taylor, and you would think that with this character of Michael being so important to the development of the story and so important to the brother, causing all this misery, that it would have been much more of a contentious relationship when they finally meet. But it just, I don't know. Maybe it's the fault of the direction. Was it Vincent Minnelli? I can't remember now where I saw this, but he was quoted as saying that it could be that Robert Mitchum, because he was making all these films at the same time, maybe his laconic performance was because he was just worn out, and that's quite possible. I don't know, but in a way, it's kind of the same performance that Robert Mitchum gives in a lot of his films that a lot of people criticize him for. That he's just sort of showing up, he's being very laconic, and he's kind of getting by just by his good looks and his presence, rather than putting forth an effort to really do a good job of acting. So that's a common criticism for Robert Mitchum. The cinematography for the film is one of the best things about it, and it does have a great look. The cinematographer was a man named Karl Freund, who had been doing cinematography since way back in the silent days. He did films like The Golem, 1920, Metropolis, 1927, and let's see, he also did Dracula, 1931. He did Bette Davis's first film, Bad Sister, in the same year, 1931. He also directed, I think, 10 films back in the 30s and up into the early 40s. And one of the films he directed was The Mummy with Boris Karloff, which I think has a great look to it. So he's a very interesting guy. He ended up his career by working on television, shooting I Love Lucy. And he was responsible for giving that show the great look that it had, which made it kind of be sustained all through the decades, looking like it was looking like a great movie, not just a very cheap television show. So what he did kind of revolutionized the way TV shows began to look in the 1950s. So that was kind of interesting. The music is also very beautiful. I can't remember the composer for the film, but they make use of Brahms' Third Symphony. They do a certain segment of that symphony throughout the film, and it's very beautiful, very haunting, and it actually becomes a plot point in the film. So I think that's pretty much all I want to say about it. I believe that's pretty much all I had to say. I guess it was. Anyway, all right, so I give a reserved recommendation for Undercurrent. If anybody has seen this, please tell me what you think of it, and if you think I'm crazy for thinking it's a mess. But if you haven't seen it, give it a chance sometime, because I think that it's worth checking out, because it has a lot of talent involved in it. So, all right. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you for putting up with my silly headband, and comments are always welcome, as I have said many, many times. Good night.